are now entering the Horror Sanctum.
Welcome back to the Horror Sanctum podcast. Come on in. I'm Jay, joined as always with John, Kellen, and TJ. And today we're also joined by Pastor Andy Mahoney. Andy, welcome to the show. So if you're sitting there thinking, Jay, you knocked, you're talking to a pastor, obviously we know what movie you're talking about. And you're correct. Jonah, a VeggieTales movie, is this week's film. No, it's not. It's actually M. Night Shyamalan's latest venture, A Knock at the Cabin, based on the novel by Paul Tremblay, A Cabin at the End of the World. Now, this episode will have a ton of spoilers because this is a pretty new movie. So if you have not seen it, pause us, head over to Peacock now, watch it, and then come on back.
All right. So I don't generally do the synopsis, so I'll keep this short and sweet. So this film gets right into the action. It's about this gay couple that take a vacation with their adopted 6 days from turning 8 years old daughter. And they're doing a vacation trip in the woods. Looks very much like something you'd see around the Smoky Mountains or something, like many of the cabins many of us have been in at some point. And yeah, like you now. It looks like the little girl. Film opens, little girl is collecting bugs in the woods when creepy Dave Bautista comes up and starts talking to her all creepy like and trying to get her trust. And then it escalates pretty quickly as you see three other characters. I believe they're holding their weapons, walking ominously in the background towards the scene. Little girl runs in, she's freaked out, into the cabin, finds her two dads, and thus the action ensues. This film doesn't waste a lot of time getting to the action. The title itself lets you kind of know, okay, there's going to be these creepy, ominous people, and they're going to be knocking at the cabin. It's going to be like a home invasion meets creepy cabin in the woods type movie, and it very much delivers on that. But of course, this is the big thing is the entire audience is expecting this grandiose twist. Like, it's not just a cabin in the woods. What do they want? Because this is an M. Night Shyamalan movie. M. Night Shyamalan doesn't make movies that don't have weird, creepy, can't guess it till the end twist at the end, right? And then bam, no twist. It's just exactly what the movie delivers from scene one. It's Dave Bautista basically says, we're drawn kind of through these visions together and to this place, and we've been shown by who we presume is God. We never actually label as God, but we presume there's a lot of spiritual innuendo that they have been brought here as symbols of the four horsemen of the apocalypse, and are here to convince whatever family was in this cabin to make a Abraham and Isaac type choice, a sacrifice for essentially the sins of the world. And if they don't make that sacrifice, each one of these four horsemen, which are just four random people that come together, it's a line cook, a second grade teacher and coach, a nurse, and I think somebody that just works for the gas or the electric company. I don't know what his connection is there, but he has anger problems. That's his thing. That's what he brings to the table. Anger management issues. So he's kind of like Wrath, I guess. But if they don't make the decision, every so often one of them has to be sacrificed by the rest of them. which is kind of an interesting twist. Because usually home invasion films, they're doing all they can to try and kill the people that are in the house, aka like The Strangers or any other number of home invasion films. Not so much in this one. So that's kind of a little bit of a twist in the premise of the film. But that's about as twisty as the film gets, other than the fact that you don't think the world's actually going to end. And it dang well kind of looks like it is in the process of ending by the end of it, when one of the dads does decide apparently to make a choice. And none of the deaths happen. They're very artfully. This is like the anti-slasher film, because it's not about the gratuity, even though a lot of gratuitous things are happening. It's not about that, because M. Night very intentionally cuts the camera frame just below where the action scenes are happening when it's a death scene. So while there are a number of deaths, it's not glorifying it. It's that's almost just a circumstance of the situation. It's not the point of the film. And I think I'll hand off to John. John, what'd you think about this movie?
So I did like it. I'm kind of an up and down person with M. Night, like most people. I don't think that's a unique opinion. I love his early stuff. I love Signs. I love Unbreakable. Sixth Sense is good. Wasn't a fan of a lot of the usual suspects like Lady in the Water, The Village, The Happening. It's interesting with him because his career, he's started up, he went down, and now he's kind of come to a middle ground where he's making pretty competent films again with Glass and Split and this. And that's kind of unique in that most filmmakers don't do that. Usually once they go down, they just keep going down. So I'm pretty interested to see what he's going to do next. I mean, for this movie, it's pretty straightforward. There's no twist. Just from the opening shot, I will say, and this is kind of an odd thing to say, but M. Night Shyamalan really needs to direct a nature documentary. Like, he would be perfect to do like Planet Earth or something.
Is that not what The Happening was? That was
kind of.
Mark Wahlberg narrated it.
Right. I mean, he's so good with the camera, and I like even how he starts out with Dave Bautista, where it's a wide shot and you see him walking up. Like, I love when you start out wide on a suspense shot. There's so many filmmakers that should do that more often, because it just creates that suspense and that, feeling. I will say, as far as the plot goes, it's interesting what they were trying to say. It's obviously an allegory on politics and religion, things like that. I was really happy to see Ron Weasley get his little ass kicked. That was very pleasing for me, being a Harry Potter fan. I kind of felt bad for him at first after he got beat up, and then he dies. Spoiler. And then I kind of felt, okay with it after it turns out he was kind of a piece of crap to begin with, right? But it's an interesting film. I think that the biggest problem that I have with it is that it's kind of like when you make a cake or you bake something, you put it together, you taste it, there's something missing. You can't put your finger on what that missing ingredient is, but there's something in it that is missing. And it's not the twist, but I don't know if it's maybe that. To me, it could work better as a short story or as like a Twilight Zone episode. Because I think if you took this, made it an hour, and you condense it down a bit, it would be a lot more effective. But I think as a 90-minute movie, I think it's good. I think it's pretty competent. It's well made. There's some shocking moments. The acting is great. I just think there's something in it that's missing from making it like a great movie. But that's not to diss on the film. Dave Bautista's great in it. He does a great job. The kills are creepy because you don't see them, and what you don't see is scarier. Everyone did a really good job. Even the plagues being unleashed on the planet, that's terrifying when you see it, right? But it's just, like I said, there's just little things in it that I feel like are missing that maybe could have really put it over the top. Some little details that I did like. I always notice these little details in his movies too that I really appreciate. Like when at the end, when they're in the car and the lady is like attacking the car and hitting the glass. I like that the glass didn't break. That's realistic. So many filmmakers, when they make movies, they film cars like they have sugar glass. And a glass window not breaking is very realistic. It's not going to break that easy. And just little things like the nuances of like the characters and like who they were and how they were very polite. You know, they were obviously normal people put in this situation, and they felt the obligation and the weight of what they were trying to do. And it would have been interesting to me if the movie it's very straightforward. Spoiler, it's very straightforward, and what you see is what you get. When you see in the trailer, everything that you think happens in this movie, it happens. It would have been interesting if the end of the movie would have made you question whether or not they were telling the truth. I kind of would have liked that if maybe the whole time
plot twist, John.
Yeah, well, I mean,
One of us read the book, and it's a little different.
That's the twist of this movie.
So,
it ends differently than the book. Yeah, that's like the big twist there.
So does that is that alluded to in the book that maybe they're just crazy and there's not a truth to this happening? I wonder if that's.
I'll say this before I do my part. The book is a lot more vague.
Yeah,
it's not as straightforward as the movie, so it leaves you guessing.
Okay, interesting. But yeah, overall, I mean, I did like it. I think that it's a competent movie. I think it's one of his better movies he shot in the last few years. It's really well made. I think Dave Bautista is a standout. I think of all the wrestlers turned actors, he's got to be the best one, in my opinion.
100%. After this movie alone, like he was already up there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure Kel and I said it, like this movie put him so far over the top for me. He was the best part of the entire thing.
Yeah. So it's the best acting of his career by far.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I guess Hulk Hogan's the best.
Right.
actor.
Well, Santa with muscles is a whole other category.
Mr. Nanny, you know.
No, Macho Man was pretty good in the first Spider-Man.
That's true. But he was playing Macho Man.
Bonesaw.
But yeah, I mean, overall, I wondered at the end, and I guess at the very end of the film, after everything happens, the rain starts, and I'm guessing that that's meant to represent a cleansing of the whole scenario, a cleansing of what had occurred. A lot of symbolism there. But yeah, I did like it. I'll wait on my rating. But yeah, what do you think, Kellen? I'm curious.
So I think of the group, I'm the only one that's read the book. So
I haven't.
Nerd alert.
You read the book?
No, I haven't.
Oh, okay. Nerd alert. Thanks, Jay. So I read the book before the movie came out because I wanted to do that. I don't know why. I never do. I never read the book before. I usually have the joke that, you know, if it was going to be, if it's a good enough book, they'll make a movie out of it. Well, obviously they did. And it's a really good book. But they change so much in the movie that I'm kind of torn. It's a unique place to be in because anytime I've read the book before the movie, I come away either saying, well, the book was better, or I like the way the movie portrayed this better. This is split. And I'll tell you why. So the first half of this movie is almost identical to the book. You have the shot of the girl collecting the bugs, you know, outside, and Leonard walks up and just has a conversation with her. And they kind of start to become friends. And then he tells her that, you know, I'm going to have to make you and your dad's make this awful decision. And she kind of starts to panic a little bit. She runs inside, and then, you know, like just like the movie, it kind of happens all quick. The second half of the movie, they completely change from what happens in the book. Leonard's character doesn't make it to the end. That's a huge thing that happened in the book. That plays to what John said, where it starts to become, you know, is this really the four horsemen, you know, predicting the apocalypse? Because the contradiction between Eric and Andrew's the skeptic. He's the, you know, science and education, and Eric is the religious aspect. the spirituality, and they play more to their differences. And they do it a little bit in the movie as far as, they're seeing things on TV and Andrew's saying, well, they knew this was going to happen. This started 4 hours ago. They could have easily predicted this, or they knew that this was going to happen, because the only thing that he has a hard time explaining away is the airplanes. But in the book, it's not as widespread as what happens. So there's still more room for you to doubt what's really going on. Another part, Redmond, Rupert Grint's character, you never find out if he's really the guy that assaulted him in the bar. So there's another part where it's Andrew's word against Eric's religion. He's saying, I know that's him. I know that's him. And Eric is kind of just like, I believe you, but I can't, it doesn't look like him to me. So they keep playing back and forth. It's the yin and yang between their two, thought processes, as somebody who still has faith and the other person who leans heavily on logic and reason.
Now, in the movie, he was the guy, right? That assaulted
in the movie,
him
they
at
show
bar?
the wallet. In the book, they allude to him trying to go out and get the wallet, but they can't. He can't, get the wallet because the bodies started to, whatever.
And his name wasn't Redmond, right? It was such a quick insert of that shot of his ID.
Yeah, his name. He had a different name in real life, and then as one of the horsemen, he was Redmond. So that's a part where they never really show what it is, and that's what the whole book is based on. Is is this real? Is this really what's happening, or are these people just religious fanatics and they're crazy? And it gets to the point to where the lady in the car scene is pretty accurate, where Andrew goes to get the gun out of the car. They've escaped their bindings enough to distract them so he can run outside. He gets the gun. He fights with the woman outside. He fires a couple of shots off. She runs off into the wood. All that happens in the book. When she comes back in the house, what has happened is the girl's been shot. So when Dave Bautista's Leonard character fights with Andrew over the gun, as he's holding his hands and squeezing them, and Dave Bautista was a great choice for this movie, because the way he's described in the book is almost identical. Aside from the tattoos, he's just a big, imposing character, which is contradicts the person that he is, because he's like a gentle giant. So he's this big, imposing character, but he's very gentle. He's very calm the entire time. And so when him and Andrew fight, the gun goes off and kills the girl, which goes back to more of the, you talked about the plagues being put off on the earth. Eric sees earlier when Redmond gets killed first, when they have to sacrifice him as part of one of the sacrifices, he sees like a halo or a glowing light behind him. And that's when he first starts to think maybe these people are telling the truth. Well, after their daughter dies and she's wrapped in a blanket, he starts seeing flies, but nobody else sees them. He sees them on her. He sees them starting to fill the room. They're on his face. He mentions it, and Andrew just kind of blows it off like you're in shock from the concussion. So there's so many things in the book that they rely on to make you doubt what's really going on.
So in the book, the little girl dies.
Yeah, she gets shot when they're wrestling for the gun, and then Leonard ends up being the third sacrifice. He gets the gun from him. They basically get them under control, him and the woman that's left, and then it comes time for the third sacrifice. Leonard gets sacrificed, and then that's when the woman starts to doubt what's good. She's like, "This is crazy. Like, I'm next. I'm gonna die. I'm not doing this anymore. I'm gonna help y'all escape. If y'all want to, there's a truck out in the woods. It's what we came in. The keys are out by a tree. I'll take you right to them." And so they go out carrying the daughter. They go out into the woods. They go to the tree. They find a gun, the keys. She ends up sacrificing herself with the gun because it's time for the fourth sacrifice. And it's almost like she's compelled to do it like the rest of them have been, where they accept their fate at a certain point, which the book does a good job of showing that they kind of are overtaken by their sense of obligation for what's going on. And then here's where the book ends. It's just the two of them holding their dead daughter wrapped in a blanket as the skies start to turn black.
Damn. Well,
That's it. That's the end of the book.
The
You
book
never get
sounds
any.
way better.
You never. You don't get. There's no. You don't even know if it's still the end of the world. It's just the skies are turning black. A storm's coming in. They never saw the plane, so as far as they know, everything they've seen is just on TV and what's been told to them. And now they're outside, and a storm starts to come around them, and that's it. So what I did like about the movie, and I'm sorry I've been talking for so long, what I did like about the movie is that they do give you more of an idea of what's really going on. I do like that there feels like more of a sense of completion. I told Jay, and I won't bore y'all with what I thought should have happened, but I think there could have been a happy medium between, whether it was real or not, without leaving the reader guessing or without outright telling the viewer it was the apocalypse, and Eric's sacrifice saved the daughter and his husband. But overall, I think what y'all have said is dead on. The acting was fantastic. Dave Bautista, he made a comment years ago. The reason that he wasn't doing a bunch of action movies, that he wanted to get into other kinds of movies, is he wasn't trying to emulate The Rock's career. He wanted to be a more serious actor. He wanted to become better at the craft, and I think he's proven that. In a lot of his more recent roles, a lot of his appearances on talk shows where he does little skits and things like that. So he was fantastic. Like I said, overall, the acting, they do a really good job of pulling you into the scenes, making you feel like, the terror that this family would be feeling. It's shot beautifully. There's just, like I said, having read the book and having the second half of the book become so completely different than the movie, I became one of those people that while I was watching, I was like, well, that didn't happen. Well, that didn't happen. Well, that didn't happen. But like I said, I can see where the book and the movie, there's things I would take from both of them to make a better overall picture. So, overall, good film, though. Andy, your thoughts?
Oh man, I got all kinds of thoughts. Yeah, I enjoyed it. I tried to watch it for a second time. We were at a cabin in the woods, and my kids wanted to watch it, and so we put it on, and I think I ended up going and playing cribbage with my wife instead, and then also at some point coming around the outside and banging on the door while they're watching it to give them a good scare. But I watched it in the theater with my wife, and we both really enjoyed it, and yeah. Shyamalan is on a bit of a restored his career, right? I really enjoyed Old as well, and I kind of ranked this one right in there too, where it's like, I know we're doing the rankings at the end, but it's just medium. And when I sat down to watch it again, I was like, I'm not really into watching it all over again because, yeah, I just wasn't feeling it. But I loved just the craft of it that you guys have mentioned. I love the opening scene of the grasshopper in the jar, and just that picture that sort of frames like what we're going to be watching. Just seemed like there was a lot of intentional moves that he made to give you some handles as to how to think about it. So as a pastor of a Christian church in the US, I think I have a firsthand experience, or maybe a unique perspective as to the horror of well-intended religious zealots using coercion and manipulation to achieve what they feel is a God-ordained mission. And I tried to find out if Shyamalan had more of was he exploring more of the political or the religious, and it doesn't really matter because they're so in bed together in this sick, disgusting affair where you can't really separate the two.
Yeah, I think
sadly.
he did grow up Catholic in Philadelphia, though.
Well, he grew up. He had a Hindu parent, and he went to Catholic schools. And one of his parents was maybe Catholic. So more of a pluralistic.
Okay.
And I mean, I was just struck by the picture, and I immediately wanted to like show the film to my church to say, hey, like this is a great depiction of the horrors that the church, that well-intentioned, and that's the thing, like these four characters are well-intentioned. There's even like with Ron Weasley, there's almost a bit of a redemptive arc where this guy was a hateful, bigoted animal type person, now finding this higher goal and refusing to do violence to others. But there's this violence in this martyr complex that they have, that they're traumatizing the very people, right? And so I kind of hated the not twist, because it raises all kinds of other questions. But for me, it just like undergirded this sense of the sick perversion that the church becomes when it doesn't build upon the way, like the actual values and teachings of Jesus, who eschews any type of coercion, manipulation, all that, and chooses this way of love that even in self-violence betrays this truth of love, because there's a violence that we can do to others that's manipulative and coercive, as we see them do. And I think that the picture that really sticks with me is Ron Weasley underneath the fabric, and his face kind of like that visual, man, just kind of got under my skin as they then get ready to drive all their weapons into his head. And then there's a whole conversation you could have about confirmation bias that you see with people obsessed with the apocalypse and Revelation and all that, and how they watch the news and they can make anything tie into the beast or the dragon or whatever. And there's just a lot of horror that could be explored. And I hope to have some more conversations with some folks in my congregation about all that.
Yeah, literally every year since any of us has been alive is supposed to be like the end times year where the beast is coming and Revelation, it's the whole thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
I do have a question for you, Andy, because I know you're not like a lot of the pastors I've had experience with, especially in the South.
You guys live in a rough place for
Yeah, we do.
pastors.
Yeah, we do. Trust me. But yeah, but what do you think M. Night's purpose was in making it a same-sex couple as opposed to, the standard nuclear
Well, it was a
male-woman
same-sex couple
family?
in the book. So
Okay, so
yeah.
so you think he's just taking it straight from the book? Well, then maybe what do we think the author of the source material was trying to hint at and making that decision? Or did that even play into ultimately what he's trying to get across at all?
I felt like it was a non-issue, personally, that it didn't. I didn't really feel like anything was necessarily being communicated with that, other than maybe it created that where the four horsemen recognize, like, oh, this looks like that. It's not that, and it which kind of reinforces their own altruistic motives, if you could call it that they aren't coming from a place of hate or bigotry, but they're coming from a place of love, which then makes their tactics all the more scary, and just that thought that our actions determine the end of the world is like a pretty bad virus to get in your head.
I will say the book hits on that several times. That's a lot of what Andrew's point is that they're attacking them because they're homosexual. That's why he focuses on Redmond being the guy that attacked him in the bar. Is they're religious, extremists. They knew we were going to be here. That Redmond guy found out that we were going to be in this cabin, set all this up. They're coming out here. They're preying on us because we're a gay couple. And that's, again, part of where the book tries to build more and more doubt as to what's really going on. It's the constant back and forth of, is this real? Is this real? Or is this an attack on us because of our way of living? Is it an attack on us because, we just happen to be in the wrong place at the wrong time? There's something else going on. This can't be the end of the world. And they prey on the whole, regardless of whether it's the end of the world or not, I'm not going to kill you. I'm not going to sacrifice anybody in my family. I don't care. Everybody else can burn. So there's the selfishness aspect too of, the willingness to sacrifice yourself to save, the Spock. The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few or the one. There's that constant pull of, is it the right thing to do? Or, is society too far gone anyway? They're not worth saving because look at this. We're, a same-sex couple that's been persecuted by our families and people out in the world, so they're not worth saving in the first place. There's a lot of just back and forth, and I don't know if it's trying to be political or just trying to be more of a talk about society as a whole, as far as is society worth saving? I mean, are there still enough good people in the world to be worth sacrificing somebody that you love to save somebody you don't know? And that's, kind of what the book keeps coming back to with Andrew and Eric starting to believe that what they're saying is true and starting to believe that, the world is worth saving, and Andrew fighting him on it, saying, they're not, it's just us. You're all that matters to me. And if you're gone, I don't care what happens. The whole world can burn. The visual of them that they kind of put in their head where if you don't make the sacrifice, it's just going to be the three of you walking the burnt earth until everybody else is gone, and then you'll go as well. Excuse me. So I think the book and the movie both did a decent job. The book did a really good job. The movie did a decent job of trying to make it to be, how do you make this decision? How do you decide to sacrifice somebody that you love in a world where you don't feel loved?
Yeah, and I didn't think about till you were just talking, Kellen, but it's almost like it's a device that the author uses to where Andrew and Eric are kind of making kind of like the prosecution and the defense for humanity. It's almost like their conversations are like a unofficial court trial for the human race, essentially.
Yeah, absolutely.
I honestly never thought we would spoil a book on this show, but suck it. We did that for you today. So I've seen this movie 3 times in a month, I think, close to that time frame. My rating has gone down since the first viewing. And often the case with Shyamalan films, besides Signs, like I could watch Signs over and over again, but his other films, once you get that twist, it's kind of done. Like, how many times have we watched The Sixth Sense, for the purpose of watching, not because I want to go back and see if, I can catch he's a ghost and all that. You guys all kind of vaguely hit on it, and it's like, I think, John, the most is that you can't really explain what it's missing. The direction was beautiful. Like when we talked about The Shining, we talked about as soon as we get that first shot, we're there. And it's the same thing with this. Like as soon as we get that wide shot, we're there. As soon as we get the grasshoppers, we're there with them. When I first watched it and I thought about it, because I used to be a youth pastor back in the day. So I had my experience in the church. So the more I thought about it, I'm like, this is one of the most terrifying movies I've ever seen. And, it's not a slasher. It's not a giant monster. It's like the unknown and your moral compass and how you're going to handle it and direct. And I like to put myself in movies like this. Like, okay, I'm one of the dads. What am I going to do? Am I going to shoot him? I don't know how I would handle being in that situation myself, which is what makes that so terrifying to me. The ending also, like Kel and I have discussed it a few times, I like the book ending a little bit better. But movies do tend to piss me off sometimes if they leave you questioning too much. In this scenario, I kind of would have liked to have that unknown. Like they're walking away, here comes some storm clouds, maybe. end of time, who knows? That not knowing that exact answer would make it even more terrifying and kind of hit you a little bit harder, I think.
Yeah.
The best part of the movie, like I said earlier, is Dave Bautista. Like, he is like shoulders above the other wrestlers besides Bonesaw and the Hulkster. But from the moment you meet him, you absolutely love him. And I've always liked him. Like, when I watched wrestling when I was younger, he was there. Every movie I've seen that he's in, I adore him. This one just, it's kind of like the Pedro Pascal effect right now. Like, everybody loves him. It doesn't matter. Like, he could pee on your head. You're still going to like, hey, thanks. Like, it's Pedro. You're going to blush, you know? I get that way with actors sometimes. Like, Kellen, I was texting, like, Jake Gyllenhaal. I think he's criminally underrated as an actor. And I've been watching a lot of his movies lately. He's so good. So sometimes I get attached like that. And I did that with Bautista in this film. I'm like, I love him. Like, he's perfect. Like, he's giant, he's scary, but he's so gentle. He's by far the best part of the entire movie. Shyamalan, I don't know what his next project is going to be, but I feel like it's going to be a book. I feel like that's where he's trending, because Old was based off a book as well. I think another knock that the movie gets is what we talked about too, is like the lack of a twist unless you read the book. There's really no twist there unless you consider, oh, it's really happening, a twist. My biggest knock on the film is, like Kellen said, in the book, the events aren't as widespread, right? In the movie, it's a lot of shit happening, like back to back to back. And I'm a skeptic in all aspects of life. But if you have me watching television and it's not Fox News and there's planes going down and there's earthquakes all at the same time, I'm going to believe what's happening in front of me. And Andrew's, his just refusal to believe any of that. And I get, he mistreated being a homosexual man. Society turned it back on. Churches might have turned their back on him. When you get treated that way, you do kind of start to lose faith. But even if I lost all my faith, if I see all that happening, I have to say, okay, I'm wrong this time. That was my biggest knock. Like, it was just too much happening for him to see with his eyes, and he kept coming up with these bullshit things. Oh, that's pre-recorded. Oh, he's doing that from his phone in his pocket. Like, that part, that was the worst part. But overall, I enjoyed the film. Like I said, it's just, after 3 watches in such a short time frame, that's kind of enough for a few years. But overall, thoroughly enjoyed it. I like seeing Ron Weasley as well. He's not that great of an actor, but you love him because of who he is. So, but that's my input there. We'll go around with any thoughts, and then we'll move on to our rankings.
I don't think I actually gave my thoughts, but y'all pretty much said most of what I think. Like, I don't think there's one M. Night Shyamalan film that I can consistently go back to and just watch for the heck of it and just enjoy after you kind of know what the whole story is and usually what the twist is, right?
We watch Signs every year.
Signs is the best,
as you should.
I can't do Signs because that ending is like, I love Signs up until the ending. But then when you got the mom that was like torn in half with a car and is just in a fever dream saying swing away, and suddenly
you mean the most beautifully emotional scene in movie history, you monster.
Oh, wow. There's a lot of good movies out there, sir.
We got your friends out here. We're going to take them away in a paddy wagon. That was like my favorite part.
I mean, that was a great young Abigail Breslin and one of the Culkin kids. I think Rory Culkin, maybe. There's so many Culkins. But the good kid actors. That's probably one of the last really good Mel Gibson movies that I somewhat liked. But the ending just kind of killed it for me. But I mean, it's a similar thing. It's like I've only watched it twice. I probably won't watch it again until I forget what happened, if I ever forget what happened. And that's kind of like M. Night is like somebody, like I'll watch a film with someone who hasn't watched it. Like I would watch The Sixth Sense with my wife because that's about the level of horror that she can tolerate, and she'd never seen it. So it's cool to kind of see somebody experience a film like that for the very first time. But kind of, I think that's the one that I've revisited the most is The Sixth Sense, because since that was his really first big budget thing, as a lot of directors who are kind of auteurs do, he put so much into that. And there are a lot of little Easter egg things in that film that makes it more well done and hold up to repeat viewings. Like he uses the color red. Anytime you see a ghost, there's red in the scene. There's just things you can kind of look for from a craft perspective. But in this, it's just like, it's a straightforward movie. It's based on a book. He obviously made some changes intentionally, very much like Kubrick did with Stephen King's in The Shining. It's not very clear, kind of if he was hinting at anything greater. It sounds like the book was more ambiguous than the film. The film kind of just hits you over the head with it. And, maybe there is some perfect cut that's, I guess, wouldn't be a director's cut, since this would be the director's cut, that kind of blends the two and leaves a little more up to the viewer. I think that's the thing that I fault M. Night with the most, is I feel like he thinks his audiences are dumb, and he has to spell out every last little piece of everything at the end. There's no room for ambiguity. He wants a 5-year-old and a 55-year-old to come away knowing exactly what they saw by the end of it. And, I like a little more nuance in a film. So I enjoy it. I guess we'll just hop into the ratings unless other people got closing thoughts.
I would say the two things that I would say that I noticed, that one, the reason the book changed, and this is small, but the kid not dying, that kind of goes back to Joe Bob Briggs' unwritten rules of film, no child in peril. That is a real thing. Studios rarely do that. Like Pet Sematary, Gage dies, but it's just not common. So that's probably a studio nixing that because they just thought, we're not going that far.
Probably. John Carpenter's first film, Assault on Precinct 13, was bold enough to do it.
And I think the only other thing I would say about the same-sex couple is, I think you guys already sort of hinted on it, but it represents two different people. Eric is kind and nice and forgiving and understanding. Andrew has been pushed too far. He's kind of a representation of someone who his parents rejected him. He was attacked for being homosexual. He was pushed too far with trauma, with everything. And when you're pushed that far, some people, unfortunately, there's no turning back. He would rather just see the world burn than forgive anything. So it's kind of that dichotomy. That's what he is. And I think that was why they did it. Even in the book, I don't think that would have worked as well with a typical straight couple, just because you wouldn't have had that story to play with, right, as much. I mean, you could have, but not like that. So
no, I agree completely.
But yeah,
you might could have done it with say a traditional black couple, and they could have experienced like really toxic racism and hate crime or that kind of type thing. But just a white, standard middle of the road couple, I don't think it would have worked as well.
No,
yeah, wouldn't have that little nuance to everything. John, why don't you go ahead and start us with the rankings?
For me, it's going to be right in the middle, 3 out of 5. Very competently made, very good movie. Not great. I think the obvious thing is the book seems like what I would be looking for. A little more questions, a little more ambiguity. The greatest films to me are like, I mean, not all films have to be this way, but the greatest films, you leave and you question what happened. You question what, and one of the best guys that does that now is Chris Nolan. You leave his movies, and you always sit there at the end and go, what exactly was that, right? What exactly, you're not sure. Cronenberg does that. Nolan does that. A lot of guys do that. But yeah, 3 out of 5, right middle of the road for me.
Kellen?
Yeah, I'm with John. The redemptive qualities of the movie, of course, are the acting, the visualization. It's just a well-made movie. But I will say, this is how I would have ended it. I'll be super quick. So from where the book takes off, when they're both out there with the dead daughter, Eric sacrifices himself, and the book ends where you just hear "Daddy." So you still don't know what happens, but there's the thought that maybe with that sacrifice, a little bit of hope was restored. The daughter was brought back to life. I think that would have been a nice little twist. But yeah, I think the movie was fun. I'm with everybody else. It's not got a lot of rewatchability because once you kind of know what's going to happen, it kind of steals the thunder. So yeah, 3 out of 5.
Andy?
Yeah, I'd go 3 out of 5, maybe even a 2.5. And it just kind of, yeah, like you guys have touched on, I like a little bit more nuance, ambiguity, all that. I feel like Jordan Peele does that really well. But it also created sort of like I want a little bit more from I want some more movies exploring some of these themes of religious political horror. Midnight Mass is phenomenal for that. I don't know if you guys watched that yet, but that begs conversation. But yeah, 2.5, 3 for Knock at the Cabin.
Teach?
Yeah, I think 3 out of 5. I thought it was a 3 out of 5 the first time I watched it. It hasn't really come down for me. I don't think it'll ever go up. I think it's to me, it's a better than a 5 out of 10, but it's just kind of one notch above that. And I think that's solely off of Dave Bautista's acting. Because the only reason I would rewatch this film really going forward, except for a podcast, would be to see Dave Bautista act that role.
Yeah, when I first watched it, I gave it 4.5. Second time I went to 4. So naturally, I'm going to 3.5 now. Like you just said, like Bautista is the whole reason to watch it over again, just because he was so great. So I think that put us like a 3.2. So we'll call it 3.5. Knocks at the Cabin out of 5. So let's shut the door on this episode. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel where you can see our beautiful faces. Subscribe to wherever you're listening to this podcast. That would be swell. Follow us on Instagram, and you can also join the Church Horror Sanctum on Facebook. Andy, thank you so much for taking some time with us. It was great.
Thanks for having me.
I'm not entirely sure what our next episode is going to be. It's technically supposed to be Mr. Hardy from Troll 2. That is penciled in, so that's what we're planning on. If not, surprise, it'll be a different episode. So thank you guys for listening. And with Andy, John, Kellen, TJ, I am Jay. And until next time,
keep it spooky.